but our guest host tonight is a longtime YANA supporter and friend, Keno Sadler, who's the founder and CEO of Synapset Consulting. He's a mission-driven entrepreneur. He's got more than 25 years of experience leading innovation at the intersection of education, leadership development, and impact capital. And his work has spanned organizations including Purpose, Echoing Green, and Breakthrough Collaborative, and he's taught resilient leadership at Yale University. He is deeply rooted commitment to equity and system change, and he brings strategic, relational, and future-facing approach to building solutions with not just for those closest to the challenge. And when we were thinking about individuals to help lead this conversation, Keno was at the top of our list, and we're so excited and grateful that he said yes. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Keno, to take it from here.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Kristen, for the introduction. Thank you all three for your leadership of YANA and for creating spaces for these kind of conversations. Thank you to everyone in the room, and thank you for everyone online. It's extremely hot here in New York. So for those who came into the Yale Club, thank you. And for those who are online and for everyone, this is a summer evening. And for you to choose to spend an hour in this conversation shows your commitment to YANA as well as to educational equity. Tonight, we're all members and friends of YANA, and we're all committed to educational equity. And if we want to begin by just breathing in and breathing out, there's a lot that's been going on, and we might have been bringing a lot of that into the room right now. So I just want to help us center and be fully engaged in this wonderful conversation that we're about to have. So everyone, again, breathe in and breathe out. We are having a gift to have a conversation with Kimberly Jones, someone who's not only leading the fight for educational equity, but also redefining what advocacy, what strategy, what impact looks like in real time. Kimberly is the president of the Council for Opportunity in Education. And you might have seen the headlines recently that TRIO programs are under unprecedented attack. But what you may not have seen so clearly are the coalitions of communities, of students, of alumni, of organizers that Kimberly has activated in response. She's a New Haven native. She is a Truman Scholar from, I'll just say, the late 1900s.
Shade.
And she's a force in Washington. And Kimberly, I'm honored to be in this conversation with you.
Awesome. No, I'm privileged to be here. I was telling some folks earlier, I don't give in to imposter syndrome. But if I did, today might be a day I would do that.
Well, let's begin, if you don't mind, Kimberly.
Sure.
Let's actually begin by seeing who's in the room and get a sense of who's in the room. So if you're in the room, please by a show of hands, or if you're online, by the raised hands emoji. How many of you have a relationship with the TRIO programs? You are a participant, you're an alum, you are a staff member, you are a supporter. And Kristen, I can't see everyone online, so I see one online. Can I see another thumbs up?
Yeah, we have a few hands raised online and a couple of thumbs up in the chat as well.
All right. And how many of you are new to the TRIO programs? You're still understanding what they are and why they matter so much? Well, we have a good mix.
Okay, very good.
And that's why this conversation is so important. Kimberly, I'd like to begin this by asking you a question that I noticed you like to ask your alumni when you're interviewing them.
Oh.
What is your TRIO story?
Oh my. So for those who don't know, TRIO, although the name would suggest three, it's actually a set of 7 programs across students from as young as the 6th grade all the way through adult education. The most well-known of the TRIO programs is Upward Bound. Many people have heard of that program. But again, the unifying factor is that they serve students who are going to be first-generation college goers from low-income families. And so because of that, we serve students in every single state, in every congressional district, in several US territories. And I actually came to know TRIO not as a participant. I was fortunate that my parents were first generation. So my brother and I have the opportunity to be second generation. But I was working at a law firm. I was doing my hard time. And I had been practicing corporate law for about 2.5, 3 years. And then the Council for Opportunity and Education came on board as a client of our firm. And so the partner who was working with them, I had happened to mention to him offhand, so, I think I'd really like to try to go work on Capitol Hill, get involved in advocacy. And at that same time, the leadership of COE said, we really want to build up our advocacy team, but we haven't been able to find the right person.
Yeah.
And so he made that introduction and I came over. They took a risk on me. I majored in poli-sci, but I'd never worked on Capitol Hill. But they figured, she's smart, she can learn. And I did. It just, learned by doing. And so I came on board as the director of congressional affairs, so the junior lobbyist, and I just kept getting promoted. And so 18 years later, I'm the president of the council.
So not just at TRIO, but throughout your career, you've been defending programs like TRIO. Recently, there's been a new wave of attacks. What's different about this recent wave?
I would say, because TRIO itself has been under attack for many years by different administrations. Some people don't necessarily believe in the need for the program anymore.
Right.
But what surprised me is the ferociousness and the aggressiveness of this current fight. I think it was a week after the inauguration, the White House announced they were freezing all federal grants, and that certainly had a chilling effect on anybody connected to any sort of federal program. The president has some very smart people working for him who understand how the government works, and they're using every tool at their disposal to inflict their agenda. And there's some tactics that we haven't seen the likes of since, as I'm told, since the 1970s. And so I think that's probably what differentiates this particular set of attacks from things we've seen in the past.
Has this shifted your thinking on advocacy policy in this climate?
Absolutely not. So I tell people, TRIO is basically benefiting now from 40 years of ground game. The council was started in 1981 by TRIO educators who wanted to have more autonomy in their work. And so again, they didn't know they were educators, but they came to Washington and they learned. And they've taken the thing that I think distinguishes the TRIO community is we take ourselves just as seriously as any other advocacy group. So just like there are unions, and we're not a union, but the same way unions for nurses and teachers and bankers and truck drivers are very serious. They take their work so seriously in terms of getting policy change. The TRIO community has had that same mindset. And so it's allowed us to now to be able to hold the line, this 40 years of advocacy. That's kind of what's gotten us to the point now. We've built a highly bipartisan coalition on Capitol Hill, which has so far been our saving grace. The Secretary of Education testified before both the House and the Senate Appropriations Committees, and about 8 members from different parties both challenged the proposal by the White House to eliminate the TRIO programs. And several members, again, senators who were Republicans, senators who were Democrats, and House members as well of both parties, challenged the idea that TRIO was no longer necessary, and they reinforced how important it was to them, to their constituents. And so again, we've built that base over time. We have, there are many caucuses on Capitol Hill. Probably the best known is the Congressional Black Caucus. Well, we have a TRIO caucus, and we are very proud that we have approximately 135 members from both the House and the Senate. And it's funny because if you look at the roster, it's got strange bedfellows. You have some of the most conservative members and some of the most progressive members who are both members, and that they have worked hand in hand on TRIO issues in the past. And so that's really been what's gotten us to this point, and what I believe will allow us to weather the storm ultimately.
How did you build that bipartisan support in this climate?
Well, again, this started 40 years ago. And so I actually had colleagues who represent other issues will try to call us for advice. Not that I don't have advice, but I'm realizing that it's not that it's too late to start now, but we're building on the foundation we've had for many years. Because our programs are everywhere, we don't take for granted that people know what we do and care about what we do. And so we're constantly encouraging our members to get their members of Congress to visit their programs and let them see the students. That's what's turned more members of Congress into supporters than anything else. I mean, I do have some fact sheets and I have talking points and all those things, but there's nothing like actually meeting students, hearing their stories, meeting their parents, and especially the alumni who can come back and testify about how the program changed their life. And so that's what's really convinced most of our supporters to be supporters.
So you talked about the bipartisan support that you had on Capitol Hill, but you also, within a matter of weeks, mobilized thousands.
Yes.
And you talked about the grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious what you're thinking of the future of grassroots power in education today.
You have to be organized.
Yeah.
And again, we're fortunate that our community is already very plugged in. And one thing we did early on, we said, let's see if we can do, because somebody said, do a petition. And, change.org has its place, but I said, well, let's do our own letter. Let's see if we can get 1,000 alumni to sign a letter. By the time we were finished, within the matter of not even a month, we had 10,000 people from every single state, from every walk of life. We had celebrities like John Quinones, who was a graduate of the Upper Bound program, to, everyday folks who were just working as social workers and teachers and lawyers, et cetera, in their communities. But it just, once people got the word that TRIO was in trouble, they wanted to find out how they could be part of it. And this was sort of the first step for a lot of people.
You reached out to 1,000, you got 10,000.
Yes.
All right. I just want to make sure that everyone caught that. Was there any moment where you thought this is bigger than you thought it would be?
In terms of TRIO or in terms of the advocacy or?
Actually, I was thinking in terms of both the response as well as the pushback.
Well, I wasn't too surprised about the pushback because, again, the architects of the agenda moving forward have had TRIO in its crosshairs for years. I mean, there's writings going back to the 1990s talking about why TRIO is a waste of money and it's not a federal responsibility to make sure these students get to college. So that part, not so much. I was really, again, pleasantly surprised to see that, because the people who have been impacted by the program, many of them will tell you, I wouldn't be where I am today if not for TRIO. I'm still friends today with the people I went to Upper Bound with. I still talk to my student support services counselor. I wouldn't be a doctoral student if not for the McNair Scholars Program. And so people really resonate with what it did for them. And it just, for many of them, they don't know who COE is. And so this was a great opportunity for us to really introduce ourselves to a lot of TRIO alumni who just didn't realize that there was a national organization fighting on behalf of the programs.
Are there any results from the movement that you led? You've already started naming some, but are there any other results that you want to highlight?
Well, so it's a long game. And so we're not going to see the full fruits of our labor until Congress finishes its appropriations work for fiscal year 26. I will say for fiscal year 25, which is what we're in right now, there was a moment when our grants had halted. And you've probably seen in the news, attempts by the administration to withhold grants in various programs, not just education, but healthcare and other things. And so through congressional pressure, we were able to get those grants flowing again. So that gave us a lot of comfort. Our community stood up loudly and demanded that come out. Then they came out.
One of the odd things about having this conversation in this space is this is intense. And you are leading this extraordinary national effort. You are fighting for these critically important programs. You're taking the time to interview alumni one-on-one. You are doing a lot.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, as a human, like from the human side, what keeps you going?
Well, I'll say this sounds really corny, but it is true. For myself and for my colleagues, a lot of my colleagues have been at the council for a decade or more, which is very unusual in this day and age for people to stay at one place for that long. but we stay because we love the programs and we love the people. I always tell people my car could break down in any state in the country, and there's somebody in Trio I could call who would come and pick me up. Literally, I mean, I've slept at people's houses. When my father passed away, I got cards and flowers. My family's like, who do you know in Alabama? You know, the whole community, we just become family to each other. And so that's a large part of it. Go back to the original framing of the question. I kind of lost track.
That's a lot's going on, and
Yeah.
you're carrying a lot.
Yes.
And
Oh,
just-
how do we stay motivated?
Exactly.
I will say,
And then in self-care, like just as a human being, how do you keep your spirit fed so that you can
Oh.
keep doing this fight as well?
okay, I'll do the first part about the motivation. I think being reminded of what we're doing by interacting with students and alumni. So for instance, we have what we call the National Trio Achiever Award. And so every year we recognize at least 5 alumni of our programs who've done extraordinary things in their career. And so recently, you know, we've selected this year's winners, and we're going to have a meeting with them soon just to prepare them for our award ceremony. But I remember when we did this last year, we were in the middle of a very tough time, but just that hour we spent on Zoom with those folks. People who one was a mayor of a small town, another person is the president of a college, and just hearing their stories, because you wouldn't know from where they are today where they began. And so that's always kind of the shot in the arm, hearing the actual impact of the work. I can tell you from my time doing corporate work, you didn't have that kind of feedback. You didn't get that warm, fuzzy feeling. So that's certainly a part of the compensation is knowing the impact and being able to touch and feel and talk to the people who've been impacted by the work. For me, I will say what I'm learning as a leader is that self-care isn't optional. You know, it's literally, it's maintenance.
Yeah.
So getting sleep, drinking your water, hitting the gym, surrounding yourself with a good social support system. If I don't do those things, I won't be able to do the work. So it's become part of my regimen.
I'm looking around the room, I'm seeing some young up and coming leaders in the room. And and I'm sure there's some online as well. Do you have any advice to the young people who are just beginning their journey?
Oh, wow. You guys are young and everything's fun and exciting and you haven't been beat down by life yet. I think play as much as you can. When I say play, like experiment. If you find yourself in a position in an organization on an issue that's not really hitting that button for you, don't be afraid to pivot, because especially when you're younger, you don't necessarily have some of the obligations or responsibilities you will have when you're older. So take advantage of that.
I just glanced at the time and we are speeding through this hour, right? And I want to make sure that we have time for the audience to ask some questions as well. But before we get there, just a quick check-in. I'm curious, both from the room and online, what are some things that you've already heard just now that you wish more people understood about the fight for educational equity? Yes.
One of the things that you mentioned with the kind of bipartisan coalition and support that you have on the Hill, it really brings to mind the kind of perception that a lot of people, especially in like blue states like New York and New Jersey and California, who are kind of coming under attack by the DOE right now for public education, are struggling with how to play with the conservative side in order to get their much needed programs into the hands of students who obviously need to have that access, while also, I guess, skating under the radar. And I think that's a skill that a lot of red states have, like the leaders for education in a lot of red states have learned how to play with the conservative talking points that they often come under fire for, but also work for the children in their state that need those programs. So yeah, that's one of the things I'm thinking about, is how do you build those bipartisan coalitions and try to get past the politicization of these really necessary programs, just in order to get them into the hands of children that need them.
I'd also add something. I think the main thing that comes to mind off of what you're sharing is something I've been thinking a lot about also, which is just like the fact that getting students into universities and connecting them to these universities, it's not just like oh, you have a college degree, it's so great, right? Like that's the first part, sure, but it's kind of that latter part of what happens next. Like you brought up someone becoming a mayor in a small town, I assume they're from there.
Yeah.
Right. And this idea that you're like giving college degrees, or at least making college degrees more accessible to students who can then use that in their communities. So the college access isn't just like a college access issue, it's an opportunity issue.
And it's an economic issue.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think this is all about the individual and how they can benefit. And of course, there's research that shows the more education you have, the higher wages, the lower unemployment, the better health outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. But even as a country, the Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce has reported that by the year 2031, 66% of the jobs in the country will require a bachelor's degree. So not just post-secondary credentials, but a 4-year degree. So if we want to maintain competitiveness, especially as we are eliminating opportunities for foreign scholars to come, we need to make sure we're growing talent at home.
So you didn't point when you said young people to me, but I want to follow up on something you just mentioned. For really our entire lives, the thing about going to college has been huge in the US. And there's a lot of research, like you mentioned, that demonstrates, how much more you can earn, et cetera. I would say like in the last 5 years, there's been though a little bit of a pushback to that. That says, well, hey, not everybody has to go to college. There are countries like Germany that have guilds where they do other kinds of work that's very necessary, valuable, and actually where they earn a very decent living. And so this idea that college has to be just, the only way for everybody is kind of being questioned. How is that impacting the work that you guys are doing, if at all?
Very much so. So I will say that issue about college for everybody is sector-wide. The whole higher education industrial complex has been in crisis for the last couple of years because of that question. And I think the question has been fueled by the fact that higher education has become so outrageously expensive that for many people, it's a challenge to ask them to take on a burden that will strap them with thousands and thousands of dollars of debt without a guarantee per se that they will be able to repay the debt. The beauty of a place like Yale, those students are going to graduate. They're going to find jobs. They're going to be okay. But as I remind a lot of my friends, not everybody goes to Yale. And so we have to make sure the system works for everybody, whether you're at a community college, a 4-year college, et cetera, your state university. So that argument has been percolating for a while. As a matter of fact, there's a piece in the New York Times within the last month that basically said the reason why we don't have enough people in manufacturing jobs in the United States is because we've been pushing college for all. Okay, I said, okay, that has nothing to do with the fact that you're, getting rid of unions, you're not paying good wages, but okay, sure, it's because we're telling everybody to go to college. The one thing I always defend with TRIO is that the fact that we only get to serve a fraction of the people who are eligible. So while we love for every single person who's eligible to be able to go, we're just trying to make sure the ones who do have the opportunity have that access in front of them and the tools to be successful. I'll leave it there. We can say more when the cameras are off.
Kristen, what's the best way to bring in questions from online? I can't see the chat.
Yeah, if anyone from the online audience is interested in adding a question, you can either put it directly in chat and I can read it aloud, or if you'd like to come off mute and ask, you're more than welcome to do so.
And actually, someone did reach out. Sharia, are you online?
Yes, I'm online. Can you
There
hear
are.
me?
Okay, you can.
Oh, hi. Hello, everybody. My name is Sharia Irving. I am the founder and executive director of Shaping Her Earth. It's a nonprofit dedicated to the leadership and the mentorship of Black and Brown girls ages 14 to 22. My question was, how can smaller identity-specific nonprofits like mine, serving first-generation girls of color, effectively partner with larger advocacy organizations like COE to protect and expand our shared mission?
I don't have a good answer for you right now because we are in such a divisive space where anything that is exclusively for a particular group whether it's women, whether it's students of color, has been under attack. I would say like you said, finding other organizations that have a similar mission, and showing the value proposition for people who may not believe in your work. You're not going to convince everybody, but you have more power collectively than you do individually.
Thank you.
Can I shout somebody out?
Absolutely.
I see Sharon Eldridge. We were not in the same class. She was my host for Bulldog Days back in 1996, 95.
Yeah, I guess
Sorry.
spring of 96.
Yes.
Yeah, spring of 96.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there another person online with a question? I can't see the chats. So if you want to just come off mute. Or Kristen, if you're seeing one you want to name.
Yeah, we currently don't have anything in chat, but if there's any questions from the audience, more than happy for folks to come off mute.
Kristen, I'm in this room. It's Rachel. I was just going to ask the quick question here, if that's all right.
Yep, that
Sorry.
works.
Okay, could you, for those of us who aren't as familiar with the TRIO programs, could you say, like, what is it about TRIO that either is complementary to some of the nonprofits that are out there doing, I don't know if it's similar work, like what's the secret sauce to what you guys do that makes you so successful?
Sure. Well, I think part of it is, I'm going to go back to where we are in the law. So TRIO is part of the Higher Education Act, and we are actually the companion to financial aid. And the reasoning is Congress said, okay, we're giving students money to go to college, but we have to also give them the tools to go to college. And so the same way you give people the Pell Grant or work study or things like that, we're the tutoring, the mentoring, the counseling, the guidance. And so I think there are a lot of different organizations that do similar work around access. I don't think there's as much work around completion. We're great at access. We're not so great yet at completion. So one thing I'm really proud of is TRIO, included among its programs, is the only national college retention and completion effort. And that's our Student Support Services program. And the statistics show that students who are in our program versus other similarly situated students graduate at much higher rates, accumulate more credits, more likely to transfer to a four-year and then graduate. And so I think that's kind of the complement there. So very often we might get students who come into TRIO after having been referred by another program when they were younger. And again, unfortunately, TRIO's we're everywhere, but we can't serve everybody. And so, it's a compliment in that regard also.
Actually, I want to build on that. What would happen if the TRIO programs went away?
Why you ask me something like that?
I didn't want to say it, I don't want to speak into existence, but.
No. Well, like I said, it's the only national retention and completion effort. And so I wish we were larger that I could say we've completely moved the needle, and the ideal would be for us to put ourselves out of business. You don't need TRIO anymore. But we still do. I mean, if you look at the last 40 years, access and completion has exploded for students from higher income backgrounds, but it's only moved nominally for students from the lowest income backgrounds. So I might get the statistics slightly wrong, but I believe the Census Bureau data shows that in 1970, maybe about 6% of students from the poorest families got college degrees. In 2022, that moved up to 16%. So we still have a ways to go. And so we would see a regression of even that 16% in the absence of TRIO.
Oof. We've got two questions coming in from online, one from Sandra Howard and then one from Josiah. Keno, does it make sense for us to do one in online now?
Absolutely. You want to start with Sandra or Sandra?
Let's start there.
Sandra, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
How about now?
There you go.
We got you now.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to have heard about this conversation. I'm just really shouting myself out here. I worked for the House Appropriations Committee back in the 1980s, 1990s, and this was at a time when Congress got along better with itself than certainly that it does now. But I want to say that the members, you could see their heads nodding on both sides when TRIO was mentioned. I absolutely agree that the support that the programs have built and the organization that's representing them has built was a beautiful thing to observe. And I'm so glad that you're continuing with this strategy. When you said that you had a caucus, a TRIO caucus, I thought that is brilliant. That is really so helpful. And so, I'm deeply hurt and offended that the program is in trouble, but I do understand that there's a ripple going across higher education. I understand that it's not necessarily singling out TRIO, and I certainly hope that you continue to have that support. I went to one of those convocations where the people who had benefited from TRIO spoke, and I cried through the whole thing. It's that uplifting. So, thank you for this program. And really, that's all I wanted to say. Best wishes to you.
Thank you. Oh, wow.
Josiah?
Yes, thank you to our presenters, and I enjoyed talking with Kim at last year's YANA conference, so I'm glad to be hearing from her tonight. And I wanted to speak as a former Upward Bound summer counselor about the way it was a transformative experience for me professionally and has influenced the career path that I took. And also, just to add to the data that you have, anecdotally, I can say that I'm still in touch with 3 of the young people that I met 34 summers ago at UConn Upward Bound, who were now, back as community members in New Haven. And one of them I can put in the chat, I would nominate as a future award winner. And the other 2, they're now a married couple, and it happens their daughter went to school with my daughter. So, it's just been a wonderful experience for me professionally and personally, and I would encourage you to collect as many of these kinds of testimonials as possible so we can make the case to the legislators in a bipartisan way.
Awesome. Josiah, so one of our National TRIO Achievers this year is a UConn alum. He was in Student Support Services.
Terrific.
No other questions? Here's one.
Yeah, so you brought up like federal challenges, and I know that that's obviously a huge part of your organization, given that it's national, which makes sense. But I'm just wondering, like, specifically, we also spoke about students and families. We haven't spoken about universities yet. And universities, it's been interesting. I've been talking to them about partnership. I also run a college advising, like, I'm in that space. I run a nonprofit in that area. And it's been interesting to talk to them because they've been very technical about very specific words that are being used.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering maybe how your work has maybe been complicated by that, or maybe how they've been working as allies through this, because yeah.
It's been challenging because certain words just, without the definition, just the word itself. So whether it's diversity, inclusion, equity, women, some words are just now just off limits and banned. And we have heard of some of our programs that are housed within what was formerly called the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at their campuses have been getting questioned about what are you all doing? And this, one of the saving graces of TRIO, again, the unifying factor is that it serves first generation low income students. That cross cuts race. And so actually the largest percentage group of students served by TRIO happen to be Caucasian. So we look like wherever community we're in, whether it's tribal, rural, urban, et cetera. That said, one thing I tell my community is don't get caught up in nomenclature. You're still doing your work. You're not basing it on anything other than whether the person is qualified for the program based on our regulations, which again are low income first gen. We do have we're keeping a close eye on one of our programs, the McNair Scholars Program, as that does allow for 1/3 of students to be from what's quote unquote underrepresented in graduate education. And that includes students from certain racial backgrounds, as well as students who are literally underrepresented. So a woman going into computer science is underrepresented. But we're keeping a close eye on that one.
Kristen, any other questions online?
Yeah, one
Somebody just
other
posted-
question in chat. I'll read it out loud. The higher ed alternative of private trade schools has been expensive and often not a success story for students. How to prevent recurrence of prior problems?
Oh, was that Philip? Well, I try to say this, we're not anti-career technical education. What we are for, because historically, students from certain backgrounds are tracked into career technical education. Our job is to make sure that students are able to go as far as their talents and interests will take them. And so it's been said before, not everybody wants to go to college, and everybody can go to college. We're just here to make sure that folks who can or want to have the opportunity to. One story I love to tell is about one of our former board chairs, who is Caucasian, by the way. He is from Snake Eyes, Arkansas. And he talks about how in his small community, pretty much the only thing to do is go work in the mills. And his dad did it. He expected that he was going to do it. But then he became a TRIO student and became exposed to what he could do beyond that. Today, he is a professor of art history. He just wrote his first textbook. And it's amazing to think about where he is versus where he thought he would be. And again, this is not to denigrate at all working with your hands, but it's just saying, here's a man who had this capacity to teach art history that would have been unrecognized otherwise.
Question. In addition, whatever happens to TRIO, and I hope they stay, do you guys work with other colleges and universities too? I know that the first sprinklings of things that they do for success and completion. I mean, are there other movements to try to have that effort be kind of national amongst colleges and universities?
So all of the TRIO programs are hosted by either a college or university or community-based agency. I'd say 90% of the programs are at colleges and universities. And one thing we actually, we received a grant from the ECMC Foundation to launch a competition, really, to identify community colleges that have done a good job of taking student support services practices and scaling them campus-wide, because the vast majority of students at a community college are going to be low income and first gen, whereas the grant you receive from the government can only serve a fraction of those students. So that's something we're trying to do to learn, okay, what are the schools that have done a good job at scaling those practices? And then how can we as an organization then equip other members, or not even, they don't have to be COE members, but other organizations to scale those practices as well and embed them into what they're doing at the college.
Beyond just politics and like how that has changed and gotten much more aggressive, as you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, there have been a lot of other things going on. Our very rapidly changing economy in our country, the pandemic, obviously, and the lasting impacts of that, especially for students who are graduating now and going into these programs, having been impacted by COVID throughout their education. Have you noticed anything about the TRIO cohorts that are going through now, areas of support that they need now that maybe they didn't need previously? And what are you hoping to do or expand, like programs you're hoping to expand to support them in these very strange times, I guess?
This might sound hokey, and some might say it's woke. It's not. But one thing we found in COVID is that we have to include student mental health in the equation. The thing about TRIO, because it's based on personal connection, during the pandemic, the TRIO counselors were the ones who had the best access to the students and their families, even more so than the schools. And so that was in a lot of students, especially at the at the high school level, you know, those kids were upset. They missed prom, they missed graduation, a lot of hallmarks of your youth. And so a lot of our programs were tasked with keeping the students motivated. A lot of our, again, high school students, they went to work because their parents would lost their income. So they became essential workers by working at a grocery store and things like that. And so our programs really helped keep them on track to still continue to pursue college. And so I think that's kind of the outgrowth of that time, is that we're embedding mental health services more into the work we're doing, and we're integrating it more. We're recognizing it's not an extra or nice to have, but it's a necessary complement to the work we're doing.
I can ask the same question in a slightly different way. Your future of education fundamentally is designed to prepare children for their future. And I'm curious if you're noticing any shifts in your programming, given the shift in the future around AI, job opportunities, skills.
So we have our annual professional development conference coming up in September. And I will tell you, we have no less than, I think, 7 or 8 sessions around how to first of all, how to understand AI, how to leverage it to help your students, because there's a lot of fear, I think, and confusion around what technology can and cannot do. And then you just want to make sure that the students are using it in ways that are appropriate to their growth. I saw, this is not a TRIO thing, but I saw online somebody posted as a teacher that they had an assignment where they asked the students to ask AI a question and then research whether the answer was right or not. And the students were able to see in real time, oh, so it explained to them how they have to make sure they're doing their own research with their own sources and not just kind of taking AI's word for it.
Great. Listen, going back to online, any questions from the online community?
One question just came in from Sevi, saying, thank you, Kimberly, for your incredible work in this fight. I would love to hear more about your outreach and advocacy tactics. And are there any strategies that were successful or that you would recommend for other grassroots mobilization efforts?
Well, we're consistent. We stay in constant touch with our community, and we come from a place where we recognize that not everybody does this kind of work every day. And also, this is not just about TRIO. Having done government relations for a long time, the system is not necessarily set up for people to know how it works and to know how to impact it. And so, a terrible example, I knew of people who would go on marches, after the death of George Floyd, but those same people weren't registered to vote. So making sure people understand the totality of what is involved in bringing about change. And again, there's this mythology, for instance, around the civil rights movement. Oh, there was a march on Washington and King gave a speech and then equality came. Well, no, they also, first of all, they had to negotiate to get the march done, but there were also legal cases. There were also voter registration drives. I mean, so it's multi-tiered, and I think we have to, and I get, especially I'm guessing with you as well, a lot of fatigue because it's a constant battle. They're flooding the zone and it's very difficult to stay encouraged sometimes. But there's multiple ways that you have to engage at the grassroots level, at the comms level. We put out a challenge to our community to get in front of their local press. And I was amazed to see how many people, they just invited the press to come to their graduation ceremonies and things like that, that kind of feel good coverage that just gets the word out more. And it's consistent. That's one thing about us and why, again, 40 years of work has led us to this moment. We never take our foot off the gas. We never get comfortable. We never assume that who's going to help us and why. I always tell my people, don't, because somebody has an R or a D next to their name, you cannot make an assumption about how they're going to feel and whether or not they're going to help us. And so we really encourage a full court press, and we leave no stone unturned. And so having that really holistic strategy, and not everybody's good at everything. Some, like, I'm not going to march. I'll write a letter, but I'm not going to march. So knowing what your strengths are and leaning into that and allowing other people to lean into what they can do, and you're all doing it together. I think that's what really allows movements to be successful. But it's especially in this age where everybody's so distracted with whether it's social media or the news bites, it's very easy to get discouraged or to think you're kind of one and done. You're never one and done. There's always another round. There's always another inning, and you have to keep fighting for each round.
What are some things that we as a YANA community can do?
Well, everybody go to coenet.org and sign up for our newsletter. Certainly. And I think whatever your issue is, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, environmentalism, find a way. I think, Kristen, you had said before, just do 2% more. What's something additional you can do to support that cause? I will say a lot of organizations right now that are on the front lines, they need resources. We are up against a very well-armed, well-funded opposition. And so this is the time perhaps to increase your donations to organizations, to do volunteer work, and hold your members of Congress accountable. They do work for us. Go to the town halls, write letters. They read those. There's some poor stiff in every office who has to read the letters that comes in, and somebody who has to answer the phone, and let your members know. And if, we're in New York, Yale's in Connecticut, if you think you're in a geographic region where your member already agrees with you, I'm sure you have friends or loved ones who live in states where there might be somebody who doesn't have the same perspective. And so get them involved. I hope that answers your question.
Kristen, going back online, I want to make sure we have a chance to hear from everyone. There's a question.
Those were all of the questions from online. Anybody else from online has a question that you want to ask live, now would be your chance to do so. Kimberly, as we're, wrapping up, I'm curious to hear, there's a lot, you just shared a lot about what's going on. And I just keep on coming back to this idea of what kind of brings you hope in this moment. And I was wondering if that would be something that you would share with us.
Oh, thanks. Honestly, and I do have to remind myself of this a lot. I look at the historic fights we've had. It's almost every 10 years on the dot that someone has tried to either eliminate TRIO or attack it in some way. And so in the 1980s, I'm going to get these wrong. I think it was 1983, the Senate Appropriations Committee cut the funding by a third. And then within 12 days, our community organized and got the money back. In the mid 1990s, so when the contract with America was happening, I believe the House Budget Committee proposed eliminating TRIO. During the George W. Bush administration, there were proposals to take TRIO and make it into an extension of No Child Left Behind. We were a victim of, I would say, benign neglect during the Obama administration. They were more interested in kind of new projects and new ideas that they wanted to fund. And so TRIO kind of languished a little bit. And then during the first Trump administration, we did see similar efforts to eliminate TRIO or parts of the TRIO program. So just reminding myself of the battles we fought and how we were able to mobilize and defeat those battles, that is part of what gives me hope.
At the opening, I think Kristen mentioned that I spent a lot of time in the classroom as a teacher, and I'm trying to resist the urge to go into that moment, but I'm not going to resist anymore. I think it's important to make sure that we have a chance to reflect on key takeaways from this, to name something that squared with us, something that landed, and maybe something we're still wrestling with. What's still circling? What are we still wrestling? So if anyone wants to name something that is a key takeaway or something that's squared with you, that might be an older phrase. Everyone understand what I mean by that? Squared with, and something that's still wrestling, that you're still wrestling with.
I think for me, it's you're one program of so many that either I or my friends I'm hearing from, are under attack. That it's kind of overwhelming.
Absolutely.
And it's great that there are leaders like you in this organization and you're doing the right thing. But then, there's like 90 others in a similar situation. And maybe they're not as well organized. And so, the question of, wow, where does this kind of seismic shift end? Or how, what happens is very concerning. So not a question, but kind of, something that's stuck in my head.
Thank you.
I think for me, I'll share that it, a learning piece is it's a reminder, but it's also a reminder we can't ever let go of, is that even if there are battles to be fought on these and other issues, there are battles worth fighting, and B, there are so many of us that if we all pitch in and do a little bit, it's what's needed to move the needle in some instances or hold the line in other instances. And so, battles worth fighting is just a good reminder. And I just really appreciate, Kimberly, your clarity in that. But I will also share, it resonated with me too, Mike. There's so many things that are being impacted right now that it can be really, really overwhelming to feel like I have enough capacity to be able to give to all the things that I want to give to. And so I think that, I'm grateful, Kimberly, for this information on how to stay better involved with, your organization and also, bringing this to our greater attention.
I have a takeaway I want to share. It seems really minor, but I don't think it is. I noticed you use the word I'm really impressed with the bipartisanship that you represent and you've maintained. And it struck me immediately that you used the word conservative and more progressive. You did not get into the left and right, which is, in my opinion, very European historic based and really does not apply to us. I wish we could just scrub those terms away, but I feel I think words are really important. And I think the fact that you use those is really effective and impressive and core, and it kind of deserves to be underlined. So I wanted to say that.
Well, on that point, I think a lot of times people decide what they think about you before you open your mouth, just because you are labeled one way or the other. And that's ignorance, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
give people a chance. And when I've met some really fantastic people of all stripes and some not so fantastic people of other stripes. And you really you don't know, there's what you see on TV. Like my mother, she loves cable news. I come home, she lives with me now. My father passed away from COVID. So that's actually how Kristen and I connected. So we moved my mom out of New Haven. I moved her down to DC with me. And so when I come home, she's got cable news, she got CNN, I said, Mom, that's what they want you to know. What's really happening is completely off the air. And a lot of these members, when you talk to them one-on-one, when you see them in their home states and districts, what they do and have to do performatively is one thing, and how they really feel and how they really legislate is another.
I think one thing that I'm definitely taking away related to the bipartisanship is what you mentioned about how you connect with people across the aisles, and that's that human side of the impact that the TRIO programs have. I think especially in the nonprofit space in the last, like 10, 15 years, there has been such an emphasis on quantifying your impact and showing the data for the impact that you have. But I think really as tech becomes more advanced, people are really craving that human impact and having those stories. So it's such a great thing to hear that that's central to how COE is advocating for TRIO in the days to come.
You have to have your data, you have to have your facts, but people remember other stories and the names and faces of people.
Kristen, I think I saw a response flash on.
Yeah, so a couple of things from chat. One takeaway Lisa shared with me is her takeaway is that finding your coalition and working together is key. And then Philip also shared a couple of takeaways to share strategies amongst all levels to circle back to make sure that process works for the individual.
And about coalitions, so COE is a member of numerous coalitions. We're part of the American Council on Education. We're part of the Committee for Education Funding. We're part of the Student Aid Alliance because information is capital. And so We're harvesting the joint resources of all these different organizations that care about the same issues and helping each other in the fight. So that is absolutely key. You cannot do it by yourself.
Well, I think that's
Unless you are incredibly well funded by, a foundation or independent, wealthy individual, but you got to be in coalition.
Well, I think that's an incredible note in which we can start to wrap up the conversation, seeing we're at time now, is that, coming together, being together is a key part of YANA's mission. Part of why we exist is to help create these types of spaces for people to convene and connect with one another. And I just want to express my biggest gratitude to both Keno and to Kimberly for joining us today. There's also a lot of love coming in the chat. And then to everyone in this space for joining in on this really important conversation. I'd also like to take a moment to share with folks in chat a link to not only Kimberly's organization, but if you are interested in kind of continuing this conversation and going deeper, a great space for everyone is our upcoming Social Impact Conference on October 24th at the Yale Club. I know that both Kimberly and Keno will be there, as well as our lineup of other panelists and speakers and over 250 social impact minded alumni. So we have an early bird special going on right now that ends tomorrow. So I encourage you to get your tickets if you haven't already. So on that note, partnership, Kim, Keno, thank you both so much. Thanks to everyone in the room and also everybody online for joining us today.